I want this to be an interactive experience for all of you. So if you would like to speak up, to share, to ask questions, you're more than welcome to do so. You can speak up on the video, or if you wanted to chat in the chat box. Just be aware that anything that you say will be recorded, but if you chat, it will be anonymous. So just keep that in mind. The only people who will see this recording are those who are attending. So just be aware of that too. So again, thank you for being present. And this is a workshop. So I'm going to ask you some questions, and if you want to engage and share a little bit about your experiences, that would be great. Otherwise, I can, sit up here and talk about our experiences, and I will be taking you through a couple of trance work experiences as well. We'll be doing some soul retrieval readings for everyone that's here, and if there's time, I'll also take you all through resting, relaxation, integration experience, which is very important. Integration and rest is critical when you do this kind of work, when you do this kind of inner work. So let me tell you a little bit about what we do at Akashic Trancework. I don't know how long all of you have been following us. And Jennifer, I think that you've had a session with me, Ruby. I know that we have some things coming up. I don't think that you've engaged with me yet. But at Akashic Trancework, we're committed to the exploration and development of consciousness, of our higher senses. And that's what we do in these soul retrieval sessions. We're exploring our consciousness a little bit. We're exploring our higher senses. So before we jump into all of that, I would like to ask everyone here if they want to share a little bit about their understanding around soul fragmentation. What does that concept mean to you? What's your experience with it?
Hello, everybody.
Hi, Ruby.
Hello.
Hi. My understanding, I do a little shamanic work, so I do journeying. So I understand the concept of the subconscious and the conscious, but I'm here to learn more because that's an area of my expertise that I'm lacking. So that's why I'm here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's Ruby. I know a little bit, and I know like pieces here and there, but mostly, I really just want to learn more. So that's why kind of I'm here. But my understanding is kind of like when we have traumatic experiences, parts of our soul, are defragmented, and so that's kind of, I guess, probably how we start becoming unwhole. And so until we can bring these, either by healing or we bring these aspects back by different modalities, then we become whole again. But it's parts of our soul that are not with us for different reasons.
Wonderful. Thanks, Jennifer. Thanks, Ruby, for sharing your perspectives and your experiences. And we're all here to explore. So let's talk a little bit more about soul fragmentation and my understanding of it. And again, if you want to jump in and offer any questions or perspectives, or if I say something that you disagree with, you're fine. I don't mind that at all. So let me tell you a little bit about how we came to explore this idea of soul retrieval through our work. As I mentioned, in Akashic trance work, we primarily explore consciousness, and we do this through trance states. We induce trance states in a number of different ways, and while we're there, we explore our inner space, what I like to call our astral space, through visualization, through creativity, through imagination. So it's really interesting how when you start doing that, things begin to happen on their own. Originally, this modality was primarily focused on past life experiences, past life regression, connecting to the Akashic record, getting information. And over time, as we worked in these states, Star and myself, as we worked in these states, we began to naturally bring in more and more elements that would be considered shamanic practices. connecting with our ancestors, connecting with animal guides, moving to different spiritual dimensions while in our trance states, while moving in our astral spaces. And this brought us to a lot of new experiences. But I never really thought about the idea of soul fragmentation. My paradigm, my belief system was centered around the idea of the soul as kind of this discrete thing. You know, you have a soul, it transmigrates between lifetimes, and maybe you have all this karmic stuff and these blockages and all these things that might hold you back. And there's techniques that are taught in many modalities for using past life regression to clear through those things. So that's really where all this began, by studying those more formal practices. Over time, as I said, though, things got interesting. So the origin of the soul retrieval practice that we do was during one of these sessions. We were doing some ancestor work. Astara and I will do this kind of thing sometimes. We'll explore her ancestry, her connection to her parents and her grandparents, etc. It's what we do. And it goes deep. You know, we're dealing with essentially the dead. We're talking to beings who have passed, and we're interfacing with Akasha, with spirit at a very deep level. And whether or not you believe these things are actual spirits or they're aspects of ourselves, you know, that's a big question, and I don't pretend to know the answer, but we're going to a very deep level of theta awareness. And usually, when I'm guiding someone through a trance experience, I'm sort of just the observer. I try to keep myself out of it in most cases, because it's all about the person that I'm guiding. It's all about the client in most of those cases. But in this particular case, I felt called to visualize myself bringing Astara in to my heart space. And if you know anything about what we do, the heart space is kind of the center of our being, our heart temple. It's our most sacred astral space. So we're selective about the energies that we bring in to that space. But, you know, she's my partner, so I brought her in there, and I was just intending to kind of do some healing visualization work with her in that space. And I didn't really know what was going to happen. I was just kind of playing it by ear like I do sometimes in those states. And it was really interesting what happened when I did that, when I brought her into that space with the intention of helping her to heal. It wasn't what I expected to have happen. And I'm going to demonstrate how the soul retrieval process works here, at least how our process works here, in a few minutes. But one of the more interesting parts of the experience was the fact that these fragments, when I began to visualize them coming in, were held by guides, by spirit guides or ancestors. It seems that these fragments, these parts of ourselves, are always being guarded, always being held by specific energies, by specific entities. And again, if these are parts of ourselves or actual external etheric beings, I don't know. I'm not going to pretend that I know the answer to that, but these are very powerful experiences that most of us can relate with. We'll begin to really look within. So I'll demonstrate some of that here in a few minutes. But before I do that, I want to talk a little bit more about some thoughts behind the concept of soul fragmentation. Try to grab some coffee here. So Ruby, you were talking a little bit about what soul fragmentation is, and my understanding is that you're completely correct. It is about losing parts of ourselves through trauma, through difficult things that happen. So I've thought a bit, and I've worked with some people a bit on exactly when and why this happens. Why do we fragment? Why do we push parts of ourselves away? Well, when something traumatic happens, say there's a loss, say that you lose someone that you care about very much, we don't really have time to grieve. We don't get space to grieve in our society. We're expected to just kind of, pick ourselves up by our bootstraps and keep marching through life without ever having time to express the fullness of what that loss means to us, how it affects our hearts. It's so heavy, but rather than process it through, rather than allow those feelings, those natural feelings of loss to move through us, we compartmentalize. We stuff those things aside. When a severe trauma happens, like if we witness or participate or are victim to a horrific event, such as what happens with soldiers, then we compartmentalize those things even more. We stuff them down. In fact, soldiers are trained to do this. Soldiers are trained to fragment themselves, to compartmentalize themselves, and they only draw upon that pain when they need to motivate themselves to do something violent. And it's a very strict form of conditioning, and it's very intentional. Of course, if you want to weaponize someone, then you have to teach them how to push away those parts of themselves that make them human. Because the pain, the difficult stuff, is not something that we can extract from the good stuff. If we can move all of our pain out of our bodies in a healthful way, then that's what we call a releasing process. And that's a lot of the work that we do and teach in Akashic Trancework, release work, how to move those things out of your light body, out of your cellular memory, how to reframe your beliefs, things like that. That's not what soul fragmentation is. Soul fragmentation is actually cutting away a part of ourselves. The most common soul fragment that many people experience is the feeling of being unwanted as children. A lot of people that I've worked with struggle with that feeling, a feeling that their parents didn't want them or that their peers don't want them, things like that. When that happens, we cut away that part of ourselves that feels worthy, that feels like we have a place in the world, that feels accepted. And when that happens, we can never feel part of the world. We can never really connect with other beings. That's one example of a common fragment that people deal with. But when you start looking into this process, these fragments, these experiences, these traumas are not just from our current lifetimes. It seems that our Akashic record, the history of our beingness, goes much further back, right? So we have past lives, we have remembered epigenetic experiences from our ancestors. There's a lot of implication here on a metaphysical level about what soul fragmentation is and does. And I'm going to go a little bit out on the woo limb here because, I can. So I workshop. But I want to talk a little bit about the metaphysical implications of soul fragmentation and the relationship of soul fragmentation to the idea of entity attachment. Jennifer sharing about unwanted rejection, inner child work around rejection through life and not actually understanding what was going on until doing inner child and shadow work. This all relates. Yeah, it is very much related. This is fundamental shadow work. It is very much inner child work. That inner child is kind of our primary splinter. Most of our really intensive traumas happen before what, age of 5, right? Our really intensive experiences, if they happen before the age of 5, they will be so much more impactful than anything that happens after the age of 5. It's sort of that critical development point. And that's where we begin to reframe most of our beliefs about ourselves and about the world. So if you think about the implication of that, the fact that you are running off of stories that you developed under the age of 5, right? We created our primary belief systems, what we really believe about ourselves, what we really believe about the world. We create all of that before the age of 5. We create this splintered, fractured paradigm of the universe where we have to cut ourselves away from our feelings, where we have to cut ourselves away from our innocence, our ability to enjoy life, our self-perception. That's just one level of perceiving how soul fragmentation works, a purely psychological level. And it makes sense because, yeah, we have to push these parts of ourselves away. We have to distance ourselves from those things that can make us vulnerable. The example of the unwanted child is one. The example of the abused child, the neglected child. Really, it always comes down to these child experiences, and you can see how these things affect us throughout our lives. And as we move through life, it can happen again and again. Every time that we experience something that we can't process, we push that away, and it takes away something that we cherish about ourselves, something that we need, a perspective that we need, a feeling that we need. Something is lost. So the metaphysical implications of this, again, it gets really interesting here, so bear with me a little bit. Are either of you familiar with the entity theory, the theory that we have attachments that feed off of our emotions, energetic attachments from non-physical entities?
This is Ruby. Just a little bit. I've heard of it, and I think that's why I want to learn more because I kind of can't put the puzzle. Like there's it's and bits of it that I understand, but then there's some it's and bits that I still can't put the complete puzzle of exactly how we allow those things in our fields.
And this is Jennifer. I understand a concept of it. Through the teachings I've been learning is that if you keep thinking about certain things, it can actually manifest almost like law of attraction, but it's a little bit more in depth where you can actually manifest a entity, like it actually will attach to you and follow you around until you do your work with it, which the work is hopefully what we're learning today.
We will be learning some interesting things for sure today, and hopefully you can take away something valuable from this experience. So thank you, both of you, for speaking up. And I want to kind of paint a picture a little bit. I'm not one who's going to say, you know, this is the structure of reality and this is what happens to our souls and all these things. I just like to discuss these things and explore these things and see what kinds of experiences come up. So let's connect a few dots, and this is what I've been doing as I've been doing this process. So let's say from a metaphysical level that when I splinter, when my soul, when my energy splinters, when I push something away from myself that feels bad, that doesn't serve me, that's going to go someplace. People that have done this work usually find that these fragments are associated with places, with people, with animals, with objects. They have to go someplace. They have to attach to something. The Egyptians were masters in the art of death. And when I say that, they understood the metaphysics of what happens to a soul after death. They had multiple parts of the soul that they understood. And they took measures, they took steps, they had actual specific rituals and spells and practices to keep the soul intact. We've lost all of that. We have no concept of really what happens. You know, different religions might, you have Christianity and Buddhism, and they all might have specific rituals and things they do for the death process, but a real understanding of what the soul goes through after death is pretty much lost to us. We have no real soul hygiene. So say that I pass with a lot of regret, a lot of fear, a lot of trauma. That's a major point of fragmentation. So my core self, whatever that is, maybe I shed some of these things that I just don't want to have to deal with. I don't want to have to take these on to another lifetime. So I'm going to go on and I'm going to reincarnate somewhere else and try the whole thing again, right? Well, those things that I've shed, those intense emotions that I've shed, say for instance that I compartmentalized and I splintered away, I fractured away my anger. Like I didn't want to experience just unreasoning anger in my life. I don't want to have to think about why am I angry. I don't want to deal with any of that. I'm just going to cut that part of myself away. What if instead of just kind of going away into the ether, because we're all connected through Akasha, through spirit, what if that anger, all the emotionality around that anger, as well as the aspects of my personality that go along with it, what if that attaches to someone else who's also experiencing anger? And that attachment takes on a certain aspect of individual consciousness because it's a part of me. And what if that aspect, that ghost, so to speak, of my former self decides that it needs more anger in order to survive, in order to perpetuate its existence? What it really needs is love and wholeness and integration, but it's that part of me that doesn't know that. It's that part of me that just thinks that anger is what gives it form. Anger is what gives it structure. So on that astral psychic level, it's going to attempt to manipulate and prod and trigger anyone it can to experience those feelings because that's what it feeds off of. So I'm not saying that this is the absolute truth by any means, but this is an understanding that I've come to, and this is how soul fragmentation and reincarnation and entity theory are all kind of interrelated in my mind. When we fragment away, we are not really throwing it away. We're actually polluting the Akashic field. It's kind of like if you throw some garbage outside of your car while you're driving down the road. Yeah, you don't get to deal with it, but someone's going to have to pick that up or it's just going to pollute the earth. Very similar, interestingly enough. There is no real loss or real separation. Everything that's put out there eventually comes back. So that means, if this theory is true in any way, when we do this soul retrieval work, when we go in and try to bring back aspects of ourselves, then we're not just healing ourselves, we're actually healing the collective. That fragment that you have may not just be your fragment. Maybe it's everyone's. Maybe it's just for you. Who knows? We're all connected in some very real ways. This process of soul fragmentation through trauma is how consciousness differentiates. Life itself is kind of traumatic. So these fragments, these separations, these splinterings are in a way the way that consciousness grows. So we have the ability, we have the choice to direct the flow of consciousness when we do this work. Do we want these untethered parts of ourselves floating around, affecting others? Or are we strong enough? Excuse me. Coffee here. Or are we strong enough to do this work, to reintegrate these things, to feel these things, to process these things through, not just for our own good, but for the good of all beings? And I'll talk a little bit more about how my process of soul fragment retrieval works, and we'll demonstrate how this works. But before we do that, I wanted to see if either of you had any thoughts on sort of paradigm that I just explained and what you think of it, if it makes any sense to you.
Hi, this is Ruby. Yeah, one thing came up, one question. One was, it was very interesting as you were talking. So would this also be, because I mean, I've done a lot of shadow work. So when we do shadow work and we're integrating those aspects of ourselves, would that also be similar to soul retrieval? Okay, that was my first question. And so then the second one that came up was, so what happens, like, when, let's say I do a soul retrieval with you and you're bringing back those aspects, to my soul. Now, do those aspects, now I get to work with those aspects, or they just want to be claimed back into my energy field?
Those are really great questions. So, yes, shadow work is essentially soul retrieval in a way. It's a way to reintegrate aspects of ourselves. I feel like shadow work is kind of broad and it can be done in a lot of different ways, but what we've come to understand is even when we're going in and we're doing these things like talking to our inner child, processing through old memories, reprocessing grief, things like that, reframing core beliefs, it's very similar to the effects of soul retrieval. But to your second question, there actually is a specific practice of soul fragment retrieval that I would say is a level of shadow work, a type of shadow work, or an interface for shadow work. So the way this works, and I'll just jump into this and talk about kind of how this works a little bit. And if you want to jump in with any questions, of course, you're free to. So the way that I do this, when I have you in that inner space and I'm visually having a guide come in, the guide has something for you. They have a symbol. Maybe it's a box, maybe it's a crystal, it could be almost anything. It's something that I see and I describe to you. And sometimes that symbol or that shape has immediate meaning. Sometimes I have to go a little bit deeper in and describe it. When I do the soul retrievals in a group format, it's a bit different from doing it one-on-one. I'll kind of show you how that works here in a moment. But that symbol, that shape, that object, that fragment contains, to put it simply, a good and a bad part. If it was all bad, then you wouldn't want it back, right? There's a good and a bad part. So maybe it's your feelings of grief that you put aside, your feelings of sadness, your feelings of sorrow. But contained in there, wrapped up in there, are your feelings of peace and love, your ability to relax, or your ability to thrive or feel loved or feel joy, whatever it might be. It's that interwoven sort of relationship that makes it a fragment of your soul. And when you choose whether or not you want to bring that in, because when you see that, you will intuitively, hopefully, know whether or not it's time to bring that back in. We really are big about sovereignty here. We want to make sure that every step of the way that you get to choose, because we have to really check in with ourselves. Trauma work is very serious stuff, and we take it very seriously. And people often come to us when we do these workshops like, are you sure that you want to be doing this? And I say, yeah, I'm sure I want to talk about it. I'm not sure that I want to do it with everyone that comes our way, because discernment is really important. Are we ready to bring those parts of ourselves back in? Are we ready to really experience the grief or the trauma? And maybe it's not even from this lifetime. It can be kind of confusing to experience emotions that don't actually come from your current incarnation, even if there are echoes of it or repeat cycles of it in this current incarnation. There can be some disorientation that happens. But to your question, Ruby, if you allow yourself to really bring that back in, then yes, it gives you a lot that you can work with. It's bringing back in abilities, knowledge, skills. It's helping you to achieve clarity. Clarity is something that's really important to us in Akashic Trancework. We talk about cellular clarity. We talk about opening up our channels, about removing blockages, about giving ourselves time and space and energy to expand our consciousness, to expand our awareness. So there may be specific things in a soul retrieval that you need to work with. There may be guides, there may be visual images. Typically speaking, after I take someone through that process, and the process is fairly quick, it's usually under 10 minutes. You don't really have to do anything in that process because I'm kind of doing it for you. But most often I'll recommend some self-care steps for 10 or 12 or 14 or even 30 days after the process, because there is an integration period that needs to take. We need to allow our bodies to process, to integrate. It's very important. Self-care is very, very important. So yeah, you'll be giving a lot to work with. You'll be given a lot to work with, maybe more than you even want to work with. So it's really about discernment. What are you ready to bring back in? And it's always okay to say, you know, I'm not ready for this yet, or I'm just going to kind of keep this over here and I'll bring this back in when I'm ready. It's really important to be gentle with ourselves. We want to be gentle with ourselves. We want to be very, very loving with ourselves in these processes. If you think about, I don't know if either of you have children, but if you think about if you were to take your child to the hospital to have a procedure of some kind done and how you would treat them for their recovery period after that. It's kind of how we want to treat ourselves, especially if we're doing inner child work. It's really important to take time to really think about and feel and make sure our third eye activity is flowing, that our visual, imaginative, creative, dream abilities are flowing properly. And I give, after these retrievals, specific steps, specific sleep habits, specific dietary habits, specific foods even sometimes, or specific thought exercises that you can do. And usually for, again, like, 10, 12, 14 days, something like that is what comes in. And what I do is I allow my higher self to make that call, to bring that through. So I don't decide ahead of time. If you haven't worked with trance states or worked with me in trance states at all, it should be interesting, because what I'm going to do here in a couple of minutes is I'm going to take myself down into a trance state. And I'm going to do this practice. I'm going to show you, everyone here, how this practice works. So again, the way it works is I bring you into my heart space. I describe what's going on, and you can relax and visualize with me if you want to. And then I'll call out into what I call the void, the place where all the lost, forgotten, cutaway things are. And I'll call for some guides to come forth into my heart space to present fragments. Now, there's 3 people in here right now. There's one person who signed up who's not present, but since she paid for this session, I want to make sure that I open myself to transmitting for her as well. So if you're watching this as a recording, this experience is also relevant to you simply by opening myself to the experience, to bringing in some fragment. Then that connection is still valid even if you're watching this far in the future. Because at that higher level, at that Akashic level, time is not quite so linear. So I'm going to bring in 4 fragments. I'm not going to say who they are for. I don't know who they're for. It's possible that they're all for you, any of you, each of you. It's possible that none of them are. It's possible that you share them with someone else here. It's not quite so simple and discrete as one fragment to one person. We're all interconnected. But I invite you, if one of the guides or one of the symbols that we call up in our experience today, if it resonates with you, consider inviting that fragment into yourself if it feels right, if it feels comfortable. Just think about it. And we'll provide, again, some self-care steps, and we'll see how long this takes. After this, we'll go through just a very simple, relaxing integration exercise if there's time. So what I'll be doing now, again, is breathing myself down into a trance state. After I have some more coffee. Jennifer has a question I want to address first. She says, bringing back the fragments means this is for us to heal, to hopefully tackle patterns that we do not have to repeat in future lives. So yeah, absolutely. That's a big part of it. We want to break away from those old behavior patterns, from those old narratives. Yeah, that is a great question. And that's a lot of the work that we do in Akashic Trancework in general, try to reframe those patterns. And soul retrieval is one of the best ways that we can do this, very simply and very directly, because yeah, all of our patterns, our beliefs, our connections that we typically make, our soul contracts, all of those things are intimately connected with our ability to, well, do whatever it is we've lost, right? If we've lost something in a soul fragment, then all of our patterns are going to kind of be around that hole that was created. That's kind of how I'm conceptualizing it. If you imagine how we have to compensate for a lost sense, say that you were to lose your eyesight tomorrow, you're going to have to do a lot of things to compensate for that. And your entire life is going to be set up around that. And if you were to suddenly regain your sight, then you're going to have an entire life set up around being blind that is not going to serve you anymore. So the patterns of being a blind person, as much as they serve us when we're blind, need to be let go of if we regain our sight, if we have surgery or something like that. That requires an adjustment period. And I think that's actually a pretty good metaphor for how soul retrieval works. We don't want to have to go through life being blind, depending on everyone to, guide us around and lead us and tell us what's happening in the world. We want to have our senses open. We want to have our awareness activated. And that's really what this is doing. It's allowing us to become whole, aware, more self-aware. So there's also a question here about healing those fragments to heal generational patterns so your kids don't have to take on patterns. Yes, there's a lot of epigenetic ancestry work that we're doing, even at a very basic biological level. I don't know if either of you are familiar with the idea of epigenetics, but the idea that we actually change our DNA through our actions. This has actually been shown. It's been proven now. The old idea that DNA never changes and that's just passed on is kind of out the window. There's been a lot more scientific understanding now of how DNA is changed and impacted through our lives, through our actions. So when we take these steps, we are actually healing our children. Any trauma work that we do, any healing work that we do that is resolving what we've inherited. We inherit a lot of shit from our parents, everything. I mean, if you think about all the things that have happened in all of our ancestral experiences and all of our lifetimes, there's been a lot of stuff, a lot of terrible stuff that's happened across time to human beings. And the work that we're doing, the healing work that we're doing, is actually being passed on in as much as all those negative experiences were passed on. So it's a big part of why we do what we do, right? I mean, it's great to heal ourselves. We also are healing the collective. We're healing the collective. And if this metaphysical theory about soul retrieval and entity attachment holds water, not only are we doing this for our children, we're doing this for everyone else's children too. And we're even doing it for ourselves as we move forward. Ruby, yes, I do think so. I think that we can actually project these fragments on other beings. I do think that we do these things. It's kind of in alignment with these entity practices. If there is an imbalance in that relationship, maybe we give a part of ourselves to that person, or maybe we put it on them because we don't want to deal with it anymore. It is a really great question. Yeah. I think that is a big part of why we reconnect with people, because we want to refine these parts of ourselves. We want to re-understand these parts of ourselves. Soul contract work is something we also do a lot of, and it's similar, a little bit separate in the way that we do it, but there are some connections. If you can imagine the idea of giving someone something to keep safe for you, if you give someone something to hold on to for you, or maybe they're protecting it for you or holding on to it for you so that you don't have to. Maybe it's a loving thing, maybe it's not. But I think that regardless of whenever we make that new connection, we can reclaim that part. These fragments always attach to something. They aren't just floating out there. We might conceptualize it that way because we don't know where they are. But yeah, they're always attached to either a person or a place or an idea or an object. I would say that more often than not, when we are connected, Star is talking about karmic ties. Yeah, these fragments, these bits and parts of experience sort of are the stuff that makes these karmic ties. If you think about it, it's what these fragments, these pieces of ourselves, these cords, what are they made of? They're made of our souls. What else would they be made of? We're trading these pieces back and forth. And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we're just willingly giving. Yeah, we're just willingly giving part of ourselves away, or we're throwing part of ourselves at somebody because we can't handle it. Either way, these connections, these pieces of ourselves, we need to resolve them and make sense of them. And sometimes we need to cut connections. Sometimes we need to reinforce them and make them stronger. Yeah, Ruby, we run into that a lot, that all of us in our lives, we run into people that we've known before, that we've seen before. And, you know, in a very real way, everyone else that we meet is a fragment of our soul. If you understand the nature of consciousness and God and Akasha or whatever, we're all parts of the same larger soul. But yeah, sometimes we need to create some boundaries. Cutting ties is a big part of it too. Yeah, sometimes if there's a fragment of ourself that we've given away that we need back, we can ask for that back. Or sometimes maybe we're holding on to something for someone else. Think about that too. Maybe we are sort of martyring ourselves and holding on to someone else's trauma, someone else's pain. So we have to help them process it back. And there's a whole nother level there that could be explored at a deeper time. But yeah, there's a lot of implications here, a lot of implications for our relationships and for karma and for how trauma affects us across lifetimes and how we can heal for our children. So it's some very powerful stuff. I appreciate all of you participating here. So I want to take some time now to try to bring in some fragments. So if you want to just take a moment, let's actually take about a 2-minute break because we've been talking about some pretty intense stuff and you may be having some realizations. So let's take about a 2-minute break now. If you want to step away, get some water, take care of any needs. And we'll be back in about 2 minutes and then we'll go through this soul retrieval practice and see what you think of it. And we're back. So hopefully you're in a nice, comfortable place. And as I said, I'll be taking myself into a trance state, and I'll be recovering some fragments. And it's up to you if you want to engage in this practice. It may not resonate with you. I don't know who these fragments are for. It's possible they could be mine, but most likely they belong to at least one of you. I invite you to sit back and relax and just visualize and breathe along with me. I'll be taking myself into an alpha state. To get myself into an alpha state, all I have to do is just breathe in for about 5 counts and out for about 5 counts. And if you want to do that with me, you should be able to go into a nice relaxed alpha state on your own pretty easily and kind of engage with the visualization that I'm doing. So I'll be taking myself in now. I now call all of you who are listening into my heart space, which I perceive as a bubble of air and light floating in a gray void. The void is everything that is lost, everything that is forgotten, everything that has been pushed away, thrown away, discarded. The lower half of this bubble is water, warm, lapping waves of water. The upper half is blue light, like the sky on a summer day. I bring you all in now and surround you in divine, unconditional love and compassion, protection and safety and security. All is well here in this place. You are protected. We are to call in 4 fragments. When the guide comes in, if you feel any sensations in your body, then this may be a fragment of yours. We call out into the void now. We call for a fragment, for a missing piece. The being who comes into this space is amphibious, a strange hybrid between dolphin and mermaid and something else. This being is alien in appearance, but beautiful. She has webbed fingers, 6 fingers on each hand. And she is holding something. She is holding a glowing white egg. It pulses with life and energy. She approaches one of you, perhaps more. There is something deep and primal within this egg. Potential. This is the egg of potential, the egg of possibility, the egg of new growth and new beginnings. And there is beneath it an undercurrent of fear, of otherness, a need to be other, but also a fear of being other. If this is your fragment, choose now if you wish to receive it. And if you do, take a deep breath. Release all tension as you integrate this fragment into your light body, allowing it to move through all of your cells, allowing it to flow into your heart. Taking another deep breath and releasing all tension as it flows through you. You may feel difficult emotions, allow them to flow through, as tears if you need to flow out of your fingertips, out of your toe tips, out of your body, dissolving away, retaining only the egg, only the possibility of new growth, potential, infinite potential. And the amphibious alien being swims away, leaving the bubble, leaving you integrated and whole. We call out into the void for another missing piece. The being who comes in looks like a police officer, an old police officer from 19th century England. Looks very stern and serious. It comes to stand before one of you. He has a gold pocket watch in his hand. There is a story embedded in that watch as he holds it out to you. Story about rules, about surrendering to authority, about what is lost when one completely surrenders to the whims and wills and needs of another. There is sometimes comfort in this, a comfort in the numbing of the mind and the numbing of the heart as we follow the rules, as we conform to society, conform to the culture, to the norms. It is sometimes acceptable to put away one's creativity, to put away one's personal will. There is a self-sacrifice, a martyrdom for the collective. At the center of this watch is a quartz crystal. It glows with light and life. It is powering the watch. And see now that this power source can direct anything, does not need to be so contained. To power the moments of the day, to power the cycles of work and time and life. It's not bad, but there must be time taken for other things. This is what was lost, what was cut away when the choice was made to surrender to those cycles. Expression, passion, creativity. A magical energy source used for mundane purposes, like a battery. If you wish to receive this fragment, take a deep breath and allow the pocket watch to dissolve into dust, gold dust flowing into your heart, into your cells, lightening your cells. And as you receive this, you see that this serious police officer is actually becoming a child, aging in reverse, becoming a child, no longer a stodgy old police officer, but a child at play, pretending to be a police officer, and he runs off laughing back into the void. Take a moment to breathe deeply and release any tension in your body. Take another moment to breathe deeply, releasing all tension, allowing the light to flow through your entire energy system, releasing all of that tension, all of that need to be so strict and safe. Another guide comes quickly, a fragment that seeks immediate acceptance. This guide is a large whale, a large blue whale, massive creature. I can feel its size, its weight. Seems more like a cartoon whale than a real whale. a conscious being with large eyes, very imposing, loving energy, vast and massive like the ocean. She comes before one of you, opens her massive mouth and extends her tongue. And there on the tongue is a globe of the earth spinning, with clouds around it. And I see there the entire story of humanity, of mankind, not mankind, all life, all interconnected there. One cell, one vibrating cell. There is the unity principle underlying this fragment. There's also a separation, seeing the self as outside, seeing the self as outside of the earth, as if from orbit looking down, appreciating from a distance, disconnection from all beings. There is a sad distance here, as if watching from the moon, alone. You may wish to join with the earth, to receive this fragment and feel the vibrance of all life. Feel yourself as attuned to it, as connected to it in every cell of your body. Choose now if you wish to receive this fragment, if it's yours. Take a deep breath. Release all tension as the feeling of vibrance, the feeling of vitality flows through your body as you feel interconnected with the earth, with all things that grow, that thrive, that live, move, that crawl, and fly. It's all part of one cycle of life, the movement of energy within a single cell. You can feel connected with it now. So those old feelings of distance, of separation, of cold isolation flow out. There is a final fragment, final guide coming in as our whale leaves. This being comes in. There is an ominous energy, a cloaked black figure, like a caricature of the Grim Reaper. Instead of a scythe, though, he just has a staff. There is age about him, and oldness. He walks very slowly into this space, floating in the air. Can't see his face. He has the hands of a very old man. And as he approaches one of you with a shaky hand, he pulls a box out of his robe. You can kind of see his toothless grin. He's not really scary. He's just very, very old, very shaky, but not unhappy, really. Just a general sort of forlorn energy around him. Not misery, but a lot of loss, a lot of experience. This box is a tiny box. Ornate wrapping paper and a bow. And as he pulls off the lid, he pulls out a ring box. And he opens it. And there's an engagement ring in there. Big and gaudy. He's holding it out to you expectantly, not like he's proposing, but like he's returning it to you. There is something very long lost and forgotten about this old ring. Simple yet complex love connection with another being. Something intentionally let go of, but fragmented. This may be a private message for someone. We are not receiving more detail. If this fragment is for you, allow yourself, if you wish, to receive it. Allow that construct of that ring to just dissolve into gold dust, moving into your heart. And as you do this, the man, the old man, dissolves into smoke, fading away back to the void. With a sigh and a breath, like relief, take a moment to feel the integration, to feel all of the light moving through your body. Take a deep breath and release all tension. Feel the light moving through your body, releasing all tension in your cells, and take a deep breath. Releasing that tension. If you have received any fragments here today, be mindful of yourself over the next 2 weeks, 14 days. Ensure that you are allowing yourself time to reflect upon the guide and the symbol that came. May not make sense now. Allow your meditation, your dreams, to process for you those things that don't make conscious sense. Allow yourself space to dream, time to dream. Even if you don't remember the dreams, it doesn't matter. Avoid consumption of intoxicants before bed to facilitate this for 2 hours. Avoid alcohol, cannabis, or caffeine for 2 hours before your resting period. Ensure hydration. Drink as much water as possible, especially over the next 3 days, to allow any toxins that have accumulated to flush out. Juices that assist the kidney in detoxification: cranberry, grapefruit, pomegranate. Surround yourself in water. Bathe, swim. Touch the earth each day if you can. If you can't touch the ground, touch a tree. And now I return you all to your own inner heart spaces, your own inner heart temples, to rest and relax and integrate these changes if you choose. This is all. So that's a group soul retrieval session. It's probably about the 4th or 5th time that I've ever done one of those, and it's always very different, always very interesting. I'm curious if any of you got anything from that. If you'd like to share, and if you don't want to share, it's fine too.
So with mine, I'm not sure what to give informational wise, but a lot did come through for me on this. The first one definitely, for me, when you first went into it, I'm very sensitive to energy, so I felt almost like a tapping on my shoulder and it got hot. So that was, I wrote down, let's see here. That's a lot to take in.
There's a lot
But it was
happening.
awesome. It was awesome, but I had to write down my notes, otherwise I would have lost it. But let's see here. Yeah, my left shoulder got really hot, and before you even mentioned the first guide coming through, I had a vision of a mermaid in my space. But I thought it was me, but I wasn't sure. So before you even said it was like an ocean dolphin being, that's what I got through, which was really neat. And before you even said to accept it, if it was yours, I already had my hands out. Like I was kind of like going through it was really neat because before you said it, I was already at that point. The second guy, let's see here. The second guy, I didn't resonate with it all. The third, the whale, definitely, which was really neat. With that one, I got pulsating in my head, my third eye area, which was really neat. And whale is right now one of my spirit animals I'm working with. So that was really neat. So that resonated a lot. So I did take that one. And then the last one, I'm not sure. So I felt drawn to it symbolically, but I'm not sure. So I did accept on that one. But definitely the first one and the third one was definitely the last one. I had a calling to accept so I could process and see where that leads me. But the first two, I definitely know what that means for me.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you for engaging that process
Mm-hmm.
so well. And Ruby, I'm glad that you enjoyed it. So I really appreciate all of you opening yourselves to the experience. And I do want to again stress that if you do feel like you engaged it, if you had physical sensations, Jennifer, like you mentioned during this process, then it means that something did happen. We do a lot with cellular memory release in Trancework, and we've come to understand that we actually do store trauma in different parts of our bodies. And if
Mm-hmm.
you do any kind of body work, then maybe there's something that happened to you on that part of your body. A lot of times it's like somebody grabbed us there or something a bunch, like when we were children. That's usually what it is. I know somebody that has those kind of sensations, and he was bullied a lot when he was a child. And so the parts in our bodies where we actually get attacked are the places where we hold trauma. And it's not always that simple, because especially if it's like an emotional trauma, it'll go somewhere where then usually we'll kind of internalize it in our hearts or in our stomachs. It's usually where we carry most of our emotional trauma. But physical trauma, yeah, it plays out in our bodies. Our bodies remember. So it's interesting, especially when we do like past life sessions, people will be like, oh gosh, like I've had this sensation in my body my entire life and I had no idea it was actually something that happened to me in a previous lifetime. So these fragments, when they come in, they give us an opportunity to work through these things without necessarily having to go into the nitty-gritty details of the story, which isn't always what we want to do. I think talk therapy is great. Talking about our trauma stories is helpful sometimes, but other times we need to go a different route. And I think that if anything, whatever we want to say about this work is the engagement of the symbolic creative capacities is what allows us to really talk to the subconscious mind, because the subconscious mind speaks dream. It doesn't speak words, right? That's why things like affirmation and, talk therapy, as effective as they can be, they kind of lose their effectiveness over time, right? They become almost like just repeating the same things over and over again. The mind tunes it out, the mind gets bored. But when we go into these inner spaces, these astral spaces, and really connect with our symbolic language, our personal symbolic language, and it's going to be different for everyone. And I think that's really what comes when I do these visualization exercises. And honestly, these are not hard to do. Like anybody who can creatively imagine can do this type of work that I'm doing. You go in to your inner space, you visualize your heart space, you bring the other person in, you surround them with protection. Protection is the important thing. Everyone has to be safe. And then see what comes. Let your imagination do it. I'll sit here for a minute when I'm doing it. I'm allowing my imagination, my visual abilities to fill it in. And I don't know if it's going to have any meaning. And I let go of that need to be right. I perfectly capable of going in and just doing this and not having it resonate for anyone. And if that happens, then it means that I'm probably not as tuned in as I need to be. But usually, most of the time when I do this, something comes through for people. And it's because of how much time I've spent in these states. But ultimately, it's really about allowing the imagination, allowing that kind of Akashic flow to move through. Like your mermaid example is good. Like part of me tends to kind of resist that, whatever comes first. Like I'm like, but then that other part of me, that part of me that I've trained, my sort of observer higher self mentality that I've trained to be able to have discernment, to let go of judgment, says, nope, it's a mermaid, it's a mermaid. So just be there with a mermaid. But it wasn't exactly a mermaid. It was actually, you should talk to Astara a little bit about the Namo. If you know anything about the Namo and the Dogon people of West Africa, there's these sort of androgynous aliens that we might call mermaids, but these beings were definitely, this being that I saw was definitely not like, your typical like Ariel Little Mermaid. It was something different. It was interesting. But yeah, the guides are an interesting part of it. We work a lot with guides in our practice because we found that they show up. So if they're showing up, then we should work with them, I believe. Now, not everyone resonates with using guides in the same way. And it's not for us to say what a guide is. A guide can be a lot of different things. A guide could be like an animal or an ancestor or like an archetypal kind of energy or a spirit, a god, whatever it is. And I don't like to say, this is what a guide is, that's what a guide is. But a guide is there to help you. It's like a personality, an energy, an entity, a unique personality who's there to help you in some way. And it's interesting how the guides hold these fragments for us. I don't know if they hold them for us or if they're just helping us to find them. I don't know. But it feels to me like they're holding them, like they've been holding them, like they've been guarding them. So maybe it's some collective energy that I'm tapping into that is just bringing these forth. I don't know. But it's interesting stuff. I really appreciate all of you taking some time to explore. Probably won't do this specific workshop for a little while again, but we can always do one-on-one sessions. If you want to explore this a bit further, reach out and we can do more in-depth soul retrieval practice. There's a lot of different things that we can do differently. Recently I've been integrating Akashic record reading into the soul retrieval process for deeper understanding. So, whatever sort of barriers or boundaries we create for us are just sort of there to help us understand, to kind of compartmentalize our experience. I'm creating kind of these astral buckets to fill in, but however we want to explore these things individually, it's very much about the individual experience. So yeah, any of you who want to explore deeper, reach out. You'll get a recording of this session here in the next couple days, just the audio portion. So if you want to work with that, yeah, that'll be available for you. Check your email. So yeah, thank you so much. Does anyone have anything else they want to talk about or share or ask?
One question, this is Ruby. What's the difference between the soul retrieval and then I think I purchased I can't say the word yet, but a trans whatever session. What's the difference between them? Are they similar, like similar work, or?
So if you buy a session, like you bought a 90-minute session, so we do what you want in that time. So if we go into that experience and you feel like you'd like to experience a deeper soul retrieval, then we can do that. I can also help you to experience some past lives. You can do some trauma work. The nice thing is that you don't really have to decide in advance, because while we're talking, we'll go through a little bit of an intake period and we'll get an idea of where to go and what to do. So the best thing that I can recommend is to go into that experience without too many expectations and allow your higher self to guide you and see where you want to go. There's a lot of different ways that we can go.
Awesome. Just because I'm excited about
Yeah.
doing this work and working with you. So I'm like, maybe I need to book my soul retrieval now as well, but I'm going to wait.
Yeah. Yeah. I would say definitely a 90-minute session is a lot. You know, most people, and I shoot myself in the foot when I say this sometimes, but most people, one 90-minute intensive trance work session, and they're good for quite a while. Some people, they really love it and they want to do it every week, but the majority of people, it's a bit like tripping, you know, it's like taking mushrooms or something, right? You're really going in, you're really going deep, right? So how often do you want to do something like that? People have actually compared these experiences to taking something like ayahuasca or DMT, but without all the side effects, without feeling like you're going crazy and without the physical side effects. So it's a serious experience, and you can go as in depth as you want to, or have it be as relaxed as you want to. But it is potentially a very intensive process. So
Awesome. And I think actually, I'm sorry, a few days before I signed up for like the 30-minute free one. So I think, it'll be a good amount of time to see what I'm going to work on with you. So I'm
yeah,
really looking forward to that.
yeah, me too. I appreciate you opening up to the experience. You know, this work draws a selective audience, and we've come to realize that there are certain people that are ready for it. So whenever people like yourselves come forward and engage with it, it really encourages us to keep going and keep doing what we're doing. So such gratitude. We appreciate you so much.
Can't wait to more workshops. This was awesome. I'm glad I found you right on time before this.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely. So reach out anytime. Any of you want to talk about your experiences. If anything comes up in your psyches, in your dreams, in your meditations, because of this work that will be done today, absolutely reach out to me or to Astara. You know, we want to make sure that everything is aligned properly, and we have very specific ethics and responsibilities that we take very seriously in our work. So reach out, let us know how you're doing. If you have weird dreams, it's not unusual to have weird dreams. Honestly, I don't like to kind of program this too much, but when you start going within, when you start to open that third eye a little bit, then dreams tend to become more vivid. So if any of you start having really vivid dream experiences and you're looking for a little bit of guidance or insight on that, reach out, let me know.
Okay, well, I want to thank you. This was really good. So
Thank you.
I might send you just a quick inbox later, because one of the guides, I actually did a painting before our session, which might resonate a little bit. You might see how I kind of like, it was neat. The energy was in the art before I even had the session. So
Wow. We do a lot with artistic expression too. We really like
yes.
to, when we teach our classes, one of the things that we do, we say you can either write an essay or create something. Because it's interesting when you learn something and then instead of kind of just regurgitating what you learned, be inspired by it, create something, and then show me that. Sometimes I'm
Yeah.
more interested in seeing kind of what we're inspired to create than anything
Yeah.
else.
In the
So,
back, I don't know if you can see the whale. That's one of them, but
oh
I'll
yeah,
send you a picture later on of the other one. It's really hard to see on this one. But my last
awesome.
question before, I know our time's up, but my last question being, when we do the integration of this, obviously, we're going to have our time, our self-care. Same thing with shadow work, correct? It's kind of the same thing, same
Oh yeah.
process.
Oh yeah.
Um,
It's very important.
For me, I translate everything into energy through art. So would that be kind of the integration period kind of thing? So that's how I usually do it to feel better. Because
Perfect.
you go through the emotions, and for me, art is my language.
Yeah.
So creating is something to help integrate. Is that correct?
Oh yeah,
Okay.
perfect. I mean, especially because, you know, our creative abilities, they shut down that rational antagonistic mind. So it's really more of a direct portal into that dream language, into that subconscious language. So yeah, we'd love to see any art that you want to produce or share in our Trancework group, or just in general. I'd love to see personally anything that you create, especially as we work together, if anything's inspired. You know, that's really what I like to see more than just kind of conscious mind dialogue, because the conscious mind is great, you know, talking is great, communicating is great, but when we're inspired, when we create something from our experiences, then we're really tapping in to that Akashic experience. So yes, I'd love to see it.
Perfect.
So wonderful. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Ruby. Hopefully we'll all be in touch soon, and you all have a wonderful Sunday.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.